Welcome to Confessions of an EOS Implementer, a podcast by Talent Harbor. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and the challenges of the system in action. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. Let's jump in. Hey, on today's show, I sat down with Charlton, who is a professional EOS implementer, and we talked about a wide range of things. The first and the one that sticks out the most is Charlton's core values, how he sees life and how he integrates EOS into his everyday and into his personal life. And there's just a lot of benefit of taking these principles and this system and being able to apply it to who you are as an individual and how you show up day in and day out. We also talked about his time at a family business where he came in a financial specific role and eventually became the CEO of the company, and how they rolled out EOS and how they really broke through the ceiling for this family-run business that did incredible things in a very interesting niche. So incredibly valuable. Hope you enjoy the show. Had a lot of fun talking to him, and thanks so much for listening. When you talk about making your life a lot better, is this really about like trying to find some sort of healthy balance where it's like it's working on self, it's working on relationships, and it's doing the best that you can, like at business or with EOS?
Well, yeah, it's related to all of that. So I'm kind of constantly in pursuit of this constant improvement on all aspects. And so, what I mean there with my wife, it's we dive so much into our professional lives, and so that's like getting smarter, and we'll sacrifice almost anything on the professional side. Do we do the same thing on the personal side? And so one of my core values actually is memento mori, which is remember your death. But the way I think about it is I want to do today what I will have wished that I did on my deathbed. So I've got my kids at home for the next 10 years, and on my deathbed, it will not matter how much money I made, what I did professionally, what achievements I got. It will matter the relationships that I created with my kids and the time that I spent with them. And so it's funny because I was just journaling on this week, and that's so hard in our society and in our culture that pushes you towards like doing and achieving all these things, and it's about you. So yeah, that's kind of it. And also, I found work that I love doing, and so I want to do that because it's actually what gets me energized. Right, so I'm not I'm not getting burned out by it, and so I think typically we're stuck in a really good job that maybe pays a lot that we're terrified to leave. And at the same time, we're sacrificing this thing that we actually really love, that we are doing the work to get, but yet we never live it.
You said something really interesting at the beginning of that kind of like pulled it all together. And you said my core value. And that sounds very much like EOS. But when you say my core value or something that you live by, like, do you have a list of kind of EOS of your values?
Yeah. So I've, of course, created, I run on EOS myself. And so I have created my own set of core values that are unique to me because they're different, right? I share EOSs, which is why I'm a part of the community, but there are things that are unique about me.
That's awesome.
So I don't know, you wanted me to read all those off to you?
If you want, it's up to you. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So much of what I has impacted me is coaching. So I'm doing it now. I've received some amazing coaching over the last couple of years that has gotten me to this point. Even it's gotten me to the point to be open to do couples counseling with my wife and realize that the possibilities are greater, right? So what's great about a great coach is they hold this potential out there for you that you might not even see. And they hold that out there for you, and then they help you get there. Right? This is like, why do great coaches get frustrated with their players? Because they see that there's this potential that they could be hitting that they're not. Right? And so that's what's frustrating to them. Not that they're not getting their own glory. It's that they see that potential and they're not getting it. The reason I create that context is that through the work that I've done with a coach, and really finding really who I am, what I love doing, this has then brought out these core values. And so some of it, number one on the list is learning. So in my Clifton strengths, learner is number one, and it is like outsized. It's huge. And so I just want to be learning all the time. Another one of my top strengths is relator, which then relates to this deep connection core value. I love one-on-one. Like, this is great. This isn't going to feel like work at all. We talked before, and it's smooth. I love one-on-one conversations. So building that deep connection. We talked already about that constant improving. So that's one of those core values of mine. So the learning, deep connection, constantly learning. We've talked about vulnerability. That's one of them. And that word is probably, I'm a little sensitive to words that are overused at times, but or maybe misunderstood. It's really just being me, right? I don't want to be editing, or I think there's so much stress that's built up in people. And I see it a lot in the teams that I work with when they can't be themselves around the team, right? They can't say the thing that they really think around the team. And there's then just this ball of tension that's built up in them that causes just a ton of stress. I actually, maybe a little bit of a tangent here, and then I'll hit the last one. I was with a team once. We were in a 2-hour meeting, and I thought it was great. I thought it went really well. They worked really well together, better than other meetings that I'd been with them. And afterwards, I talked to two of the members, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness we got out of there. That was terrible." And there wasn't really anything on the outside that happened. It was all just internal, and they were just in pain because there's so much tension. So again, that's that vulnerability, just being able to be yourself. So often we just can't do that, or we don't do it, and it just causes so much pain. And so the last one there is memento mori that we talked about. Doing today what I will have hope that I did on my deathbed.
I thought it was so interesting what you just said about vulnerability, because all too often when we talk about vulnerability, my belief is how it's viewed is about candid conversation. Like when people say vulnerability, it's just the ability to be able to speak your mind. And the way that you just put it was more about authenticity and being yourself. And I love that. And like, when you think about vulnerability as a personal core value, is this with everybody? Like, are you living, is vulnerability to you on your personal core value of like the deep relationships that you already have? Or is it just a way of thinking, living life, and vulnerable in general?
Yeah, it's funny. This conversation is actually making me think, does that word actually need to be authenticity? But yeah, to your question, is it with everybody? It's of course to varying degrees. So me and my wife were actually having this conversation yesterday, that there are certain people that we are around that we've been really open with, and they've kind of betrayed that in us by maybe, we opened up about something really deep, and then it was like, they didn't really listen. It was just, well, you should just do this. I can fix it for you. I'm better. I can fix it for you. And so there are people that you then learn, well, maybe I'm not going to go that deep, right? I'm still going to be myself up here. I can still be real up here. It doesn't mean I have to share as much, right? And so of course you have deeper relationships, and you share different things with different people. So you asked me earlier, is anything off limits? And I said no, but of course the things we talk about will be different than what I'm talking about with my, very few really, really good friends. Or I don't know if that answers that question, but the goal is that I'm always me, always. And that can look different, of course, too, right? You can not edit, and still, if I'm in front of a client, it's going to look different than if I'm having coffee with someone, maybe. And it's going to look different than if I'm in front of, speaking in front of 200 people, maybe. There'll be the thread will be there, but I don't know. That's probably just like maybe right? You act a little differently depending on the setting.
But getting back to your core of authenticity, and being filtered is probably a little different than always being you or always being yourself.
Yeah.
And do you apply these things, not these things as in core values, but the principles of EOS? So think about like the core focus and niche. Like, do you go that far with kind of how you run your own life and fill out all those blocks?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, do you have a scorecard for yourself?
Yeah, I've got it all. We run on EOS because we're running our own practices, our own business. And so if we tell everyone that this is the best way to run a business, that you're going to get more traction, you're going to get everything you want from your business, we would be crazy if we're not doing it. So yeah.
just out of curiosity, what's on your personal scorecard?
Yeah. So when you say personal, are you meaning my personal business scorecard?
Well, the way that
Kind
I
of the
kind
mix
of,
of those.
yeah, the way that I kind of interpreted this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like more of like you're running your life on EOS. It's like a kind of a mindset. And so like, I was curious if you had a personal scorecard of like, is it health related? Is it, relationship? Like, is that how you look at it? Or is it, strictly business statistics?
Yeah, I do. I do have both. So on my one, I have one scorecard that has some business activities, and then I have one of mine is that I have coffee or I think it actually says coffee with Kemery, who's my wife, and so I want one of those every week. So that's yesterday we had breakfast together. That's coffee or breakfast. Lunch could be in there too, of course. But the point is that I'm setting aside time for her, because the goal of the scorecard is to give you a pulse on how it's going, right? An absolute pulse on, we say on how the business is going, but of course this is your life too. So put the most important things on there that are going to be indicators of that, and make sure that you do them. So if I'm making sure that I'm spending time with my wife one-on-one, it's a good indicator that things are going to keep going well. And then I again, back to the learner. I love learning. So I have a book goal for the year that's on my scorecard as well.
What's your book goal? Just out of curiosity. I always set targets here and I miss it every single year. What's yours?
Yeah, it's 52 on the scorecard, but I'm already at 24, I think. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm already thinking 75.
Love it. So let's talk about, I thought the gig that you started back in 2013, one of the reasons that I love this is because it's a family-owned business. It was very much, it was very much in a niche. And I have this vision of one day of buying companies. And when you talked about this before, and the research that I've done, if I were looking for companies, like that would be the perfect one. And so when you showed up, what did it look like? Like, how were things going?
Yeah, so we were doing bank reconciliations on ledger paper. That's the big green paper with the squares. I don't think I'd ever seen that before when I got there. Not using really Excel much. Didn't really have budgets, and really a lot hadn't changed in 20 years. The third generation was taking over. So this wasn't my family business. I came in to help run it. Third generation was taking over, and so partly why they brought me in. I was the first one of their team, and so it's like a lot of companies out there that they've done well, but just haven't changed. And you get to, especially in these family businesses where one generation is to the point where they say, look, we don't need to push the gas. We don't need to do all this hard stuff. We've done it and it's great. Look, it's a lifestyle business now. And the next generation is saying, whoa, you did your thing. We want to do our thing now. Right? We want to get the accomplishment, the achievement, and we want to take this to a different level. And so that's kind of where it was at. So I came in to replace a longtime CFO. So quickly kind of cleaned up some of the finances, but then became operational and strategic pretty quickly, and hired an accountant who ended up being our CFO. She and I flipped basically every department and relayed the foundation of the company basically. And so over time, everything was reporting through me. Ultimately officially became CEO, and we found EOS and implemented it. And over about a 2-year span, we nearly doubled the value of that business. And so that was doing things that we just had never done before, and gaining clarity, gaining traction, like the book. And we became so valuable that we sold the company. So through that time, I was there nearly a decade, and so we went through all of the same things that companies do. Initially it was the 2-hour Monday update meeting, right, with the leadership team, where it's the same thing over and over. We're getting updates on sales accounts that we've been talking about for a year and a half. And then we leave, right? You're walking out the door thinking, well, the time's up, but we just talked about the same thing we talked about last week. And this feels like deja vu, and it's going to happen again next week. And so when I look back on this now, I think it is so crazy that we were just going on day after day, week after week, month after month with no real goals. We never had rocks. We never had quarterly quarterly goals. It was just grow, which is what most companies are doing. It's just, where are we going? Well, we're growing. Well, how are we going to do that? We don't have a real plan.
And when you first got there, it sounds like you were doing things that were kind of optimizing the business. Did you already like understand or know about EOS, or were these just generally like things that you knew would improve the efficiency and you were implementing those? And as you continue to move up, then there was this aha moment of like, you picked up a book of traction or something like that.
Yeah. So I didn't know about EOS until probably 2018, maybe. And then we implemented there in 2020. So it was really, it's kind of just that. I came actually from a finance accounting background, so just kind of looking at problems and trying to solve them. And then when you're at a smaller business, it was 100 employees. You have to be involved in a lot of things, right? You're wearing a lot of hats. Some of that's probably drive with me. And then I got into a peer group, which then exposed me to a lot of other people, a lot of other ideas, and that was really just key for me. And through this peer group was actually where I found EOS. The best companies in my peer group were running on EOS, so it kind of became obvious. But there was a long time before then, and so it's other books that I would read and trying to implement things or just ideas, hearing what other people are doing and wanting to do that. That's back to that constant improvement, right? In my core value. So it's trying to explain it. It's really it's there.
And for the peer group, was this something like Vistage or?
Yeah, it's REF. So here in South Bend, Indiana, we don't have, we hadn't had Vistage EO. There's a YPO in Chicago and in Indianapolis, but REF is the one here. There's 20 peer groups.
Got it. Very cool. And so before the business put in EOS, like, was there a scorecard? Maybe they didn't call it a scorecard. Maybe they called it KPIs. Like, was there anything that they were tracking outside of like revenue and profitability that provided a North Star for everybody in the operation?
No, it was really that revenue, profitability, cash, just the traditional numbers. And of course, from like a sales standpoint, which a lot of these businesses are focused on, right? They're putting a ton of pressure on their sales leader. And yet there's usually not a leading indicator on how do we get to where we want to be, right? We hire people and say, go out and get it, but we don't define, who is your target market? Who should we spending our time going after? Because everybody's seen it. I saw it. You have salespeople that go out and they just do things and they spend time and they talk about these accounts, but the same amount of time on a $25,000 account is the same amount of time on a $500,000 account. Let's be clear about which ones of those we want to go after. That's really hard for people to wrap their head around, and maybe not wrap their head around, but really admit that they can define them. Everybody wants to say, sales isn't that way. We got to build relationships and we just see what pops up.
And are you of the mindset that, so when you think about sales, there's an investment there. There's an investment of time and money. And so I loved what you just said, because do you go and get the smaller account, or do you go get the $500,000 account, which is like, where are you going to spend your resources? For businesses that are investing in a certain area, but have inbound where it doesn't quite meet their ideal customer profile, like, should businesses still accept those types of clients, or once you develop this is our ideal customer profile, like, these are even the only people we're going to talk to?
Yeah, it's probably unique for everyone, but the way that I like to approach that is just say, well, we're just going to charge those people what it would make sense to do that, right? What is the number that we're willing to make to do that? And so we actually did this. That of course, the 20/80 rule. We had 80% of our revenue, if not more, was in 20% of our customers. And so when you have 500 customers, that's a lot that are in the bottom 80%. It could be, for us, it was like 350, 400 customers. So what we did is we just charged them a lot more. And that was like a 50%, 100% price increase, because they're smaller volumes, right? And so we said, what would we have to make then to be willing to do the work? And our approach was, if we lose half of them, if we double the prices and we lose half of them, we get the same amount of money with half the work. Great. So it depends. It's if you have a company that's making computers and and they were also making coffee cups. And so people are coming in still wanting those coffee cups, even though it's not their core focus and what they're really great at. Maybe that's different because you maybe want to offload the coffee cups because it's completely different, right? Usually that's not the case. So it just depends. If you have a product that's sitting on the shelf and you're not targeting the customer that buys 10 of them, but they come to you anyway, and you have them on the shelf, sell the product. But you're not going out there using your precious sales and marketing dollars, efforts, time, effort on it.
It makes so much sense. And like when you had first gotten there, did they have a clear understanding of like their purpose, why they existed, their niche? Like did they have at least a vision that the organization was centered around?
Not stated. No. So what it was implicitly, I suppose, was that we created technically sound coatings, extremely technical coatings that protect assets. It was probably implicit, I guess. Never stated. But, what's interesting is with a lot of companies that have been around a long time and they've, quote unquote, been successful, there's just this kind of stigma around even stating things like that. And really, so that's the same probably with this work that we do with EOS. People say, well, yeah, we've done mission work before. We've done core value work before. And so there are always skeptics on really most of my teams. And they're usually the people that have done some type of work like this before. And then, of course, oftentimes they're skeptics because they've worked at companies that have done the work. Maybe they've done a 2-day offsite and then they come back and they never touch it again. Or they go do the work and it's really just for marketing, right? They don't actually live it. And so people get rubbed the wrong way by that. And so I bring that up because that's, perhaps part of the reason why we didn't have that. And there was some resistance over the years in doing things like that.
And so when you talk about stigma and like, yes, we've done mission work before, is this just one of those like, well, this is the way we've always done it. We're growing. Everybody is happy. So that like, there's no point to do this work if we all implicitly understand and we're growing. Like there's no need to do the mission work.
Yeah. If the pain's not strong enough, that's really what you're saying, that the pain isn't strong enough to change. I think often leaders, they're just not willing to say that there's a better way because of what that would mean. And what does that mean for me then, right? In my ego, it's so much easier to say, hey, well, the next level down, these people can get better. Let's do leadership development for those people, but we don't need it, right? Because then you got to be a little vulnerable and you need to say where you can improve, and or people are going to think that I'm not good if I say that we need to do this. I think that happens a lot.
And when you first discovered EOS from your peer group, did you personally self-implement, or were you like, I need to go find a certified implementer to help us out with this on day one?
Yeah, we tried to do some self-implementation for a while, 6 months, and then we realized we needed an implementer. And we had a great team. I mentioned my CFO and I were attached at the hip, really flipping all of the departments, resetting the foundation of the company. She's awesome and a great friend of mine now. A great person, willing to put in the work, focused. My head of ops was a former captain in the Marines, super disciplined guy, no ego. And then our head of technology had been at the company for 45 years and was just the nicest man in the world. We had a great team, and it's still really hard to do it on your own. Because when priorities change, when you're in the middle of it, you change your priorities, right? And you don't see yourself. What we say a lot is it's like sports. When you're playing the game, you don't see yourself playing the game. Right? LeBron James, Michael Jordan, they come off the court and coach tells them, "Hey, here's what you were doing." They didn't see themselves doing it. They still need to be coached because they can't see themselves playing the game. And so having that person with you to see things that you don't see and to just hold you accountable and ask you questions like, wait a minute, we set our rocks 3 weeks ago, right? So the rocks are the most important things we need to do this quarter. We set those, and then 3 weeks later, something came up and you changed directions. Most companies just completely change directions and they say, well, that came up and it was important. But to have somebody asking you, well, why didn't we know that 3 weeks ago? Or, all right, so do we not know the business well enough that we didn't know that this was going to come up? What would we have to have known 3 weeks ago that we would have known that? Or did somebody know it and they just didn't say it? So we weren't being open and honest. And right, all of those pull out ways to improve and they pull out issues.
And you were talking about self-implementing and the change of priorities. And so is this something like if you don't have a certified implementer or someone externally that's helping you out, like the shift in priorities is not just and I shouldn't say just a rock, because rocks are incredibly important. The foundation of even getting to the place of setting rocks is having something like EOS or having EOS in place. And like during the self-implementation phase, were there other pressing priorities or other fires or other change in directions where it's just like, well, this EOS thing can just kind of sit on the back burner and we'll get back to it once we solve these issues over here?
Yeah. So the reality is from what I've seen, it's doing it on your own. You haven't set out probably in the right way where you're going long term, right? And so we set that in the order of, hey, where are you going longest term? So let's just say 5 to 10 years. What does that look like in 3 years? What does the organization need to look like to lay that foundation for 5 to 10? And then, okay, what do we need to do this year? What are the 3 to 7 most important things we need to do this year to get to that organization in 3 years? And then if that's the case, what do we need to do this quarter? What are the 3 to 7 most important things to make sure we're going to hit that 1 year plan? And so without doing that, yeah, you have those priorities that you're doing quarter after quarter, but they may not even really be the right ones anyway. Right, because you haven't gone through the framework, or maybe you're really good at it and you have picked the right ones, and yet things come up and you change directions. Right, it's usually, from what I found too, those goals that are created within a company just typically aren't set with a due date either. It's funny. A lot of my clients will say we get to the end of the quarter and we review the prior quarter, and so there are times that their rock completion is like 40%. And they say, yeah, but it's black and white with you. It's either done or not done. So some of these we're going to get done in a week or two. So should we really be that upset? And what I tell them is, if we miss on these quarter after quarter, like on those time frames, quarter after quarter, over the span of 3 to 4 years, we're off by like 3 quarters, right? The accumulation of those weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, we've missed 3 quarters worth of time. And so it adds up, and it's important.
What was the hardest part? So self-implementing, and it sounds like you laid a lot of groundwork, and you hadn't known about EOS yet, but you had come in and you knew that certain things had to change. And so you were doing a lot of work to help with efficiency and help really kind of set the foundation. Then it sounds like you guys went and tried to self-implement, and there was competing priorities or changing priorities about 6 months in. So you go out and you get a certified implementer. What was like the hardest part of actually getting EOS implemented into that business?
Yeah, it's funny because I have to think through kind of set my clients aside to really get to that. I think I'm going to give a mixed answer because I can't help think about my clients too. But it's usually starts with buy-in. Right? We kind of talked about this earlier with owners and leaders wanting to do this work. It's a lot easier to focus on the team below them. And so to get the buy-in to say, hey, we're going to do something different is hard. So on the teams that I coach, I mentioned that there's usually a skeptic or two. And so that makes it challenging. There's not really something that completely jumps out to me as what was the hardest. We were in the middle of selling the company. And so there were those factors. And then some of it's just, you always have structure changes. So the accountability chart is the organizational structure. And every company that goes through this makes changes to that because we've just not thought about it the same way, right? We've created positions around people. And so that's hard because anytime you're dealing with people and moving them around and sometimes getting rid of them, it's hard. And then so you need them to buy in too if they're being moved. We did a lot of kind of just kept the same people, but we shifted them under different people. And that can be hard. The accountability chart is not hierarchy. It's just lines of communication and accountability. But when people see it, they think hierarchy. So now when we put people that were next to each other, one person under the other, that causes some challenges. And so you just have to work through that.
That's interesting. What I was trying to think of was like, I wonder if there's another way that you could create an organizational chart or an accountability chart that didn't have hierarchy. Because it's just like, it's implicit in the graphic itself of like where people report and it always creates, always creates issues.
Yeah, you could draw it like a circle.
I was thinking
and have the leadership team in this circle, but then they're at the middle of the circle.
Yeah, I was thinking, it's fun. Our brains work the same way. Like that's what I was thinking. Was like, well, you could do a circle, and then I was like, well, maybe you could flip it on its head and be like, people see right through that. What if there's go ahead.
Well, I always like to just even sometimes just use different words and say, rather than the people that are at the bottom, say they're the people at the front lines, right? The ones at the front lines, and that's kind of, I actually think of like the circle when I say that. We've got like the leadership team in the middle. The front lines are the people in a manufacturer. They're the ones on the floor, or maybe they're customer service, right? Talking to the customers.
I couldn't agree more with you when you talk about buy-in, because like if you don't have buy-in, then nothing will change, nothing will happen. And so like it's not just about like people being skeptical. It's like you need them 100% on board. And how we did it at Hunt a Killer was, we didn't go all the way down the organization. We were probably about 80 people when we went out and actually got a certified implementer. Actually, I think she's an expert implementer now. But it's not that we ignored, but like it was too fresh. It was too new. There was too much unknown, and we didn't want to push it throughout the organization. And so where we hyper focused was at the leadership team level. But like you, I was also in a peer group, and we used to meet once a month on Thursdays. I think it was like the third Thursday of every month. And my leadership team knew that Friday there was 1,000 ideas coming their way. And so whether they called out sick or just rolled their eyes or like whatever happened, like they just knew I was coming back, and like it was going to be painful because there's 1,000 ideas. And this was interpreted as one of them, because we had an EOS implementer that came through our Vistage group. He gave the 3-hour presentation. You write everything down. You're like, oh my gosh, just out of 3 hours, I can see how this is a game changer we need to implement. And so there was very much skeptical, but like we really focused on getting buy-in at that level. And then once we had the buy-in, we moved to increasing to a level of expertise where they could become mini implementers, because they all have to run their own L10s. And so they have to be able to answer the same questions that they had, which means they need to get all their questions out through several cycles of going through this. How, like, if you have skeptics on the leadership team, what are some ways that you can help them get on board?
Yeah. So a lot of times those skeptics are the people that don't want accountability. People that want accountability love this. So oftentimes those people, they either opt out, maybe they get voted off the team, or they come around. Right, the ones that have seen have done some of vision, core value work before. They realize that this is different, and so they come around. But the interesting thing about this topic too is that oftentimes a CEO, right, the leader, won't make the decision to go with EOS because there's not full buy-in, and so they're ruling by consensus, which also can't happen. And there's a time where the leader needs to decide that this is what's best for the company, and then they're going to create a team that is bought in on it. So I see that a lot. A lot of times, the leader just doesn't want to be the one making the decision, and they almost don't even see that their people want it or need it too, and they just won't make the decision to do it, even though it's best for them. So what's behind that, I'm not quite sure, but.
Is that where you think an integrator comes in and is helpful, or is that where like the indecisiveness, there needs to be a change there as well?
Yeah, that's a great question and insight, because that's typically what I see in my clients is the ones that are indecisive, the ones that are IDSing too long, right? They're discussing their issues far too long. They need an integrator to cut through and say, whoa, guys, here's what I'm seeing. Or, we just need to do this. This is what's best for the company. And something as simple as just cutting through and saying that. So yeah, would it be helpful for those people if they had an integrator? Yeah. And usually people aren't thinking about an integrator unless they're doing EOS, so, that's not always, that's a generalization, but most companies in kind of the size that we're dealing with, they're a leader that's visionary, usually a visionary leader sitting in the integrator seat too. And they didn't even know that two seats existed. They didn't even know they were there. And so when we talk about them and you start to explain, oh, look, here's what you're doing as visionary and this is integrator work, it starts to become a little clear, but it takes time. Everybody's different on that. But very clear for me and my clients that don't have an integrator. Just what you said, they're not as decisive all the way around.
And so you went through this at the company and you saw the magic and what it does. And so you said, I want to go do this professionally now.
Yeah. So I helped transition in new management into the company that we sold and hired a coach. Right. So what am I going to do now that I'm grown up? And what I found was what I loved doing over the past decade was coaching the owners and leadership team, right, to see this potential that they didn't know existed. Right? And I use those words the same as a coach because it felt like that to me. Right? The frustration that I had over those years was caused by me seeing that it could be so much better, and there was a lot of frustration. Right? Not surprising. So there was that, and then I lived EOS, and it was amazing, and I was evangelizing and telling people in my peer groups that they need to be doing it, and so it was really like this perfect union of this coaching owners, leaders, helping them do something that we did, helping them see a potential that they didn't know existed, and then helping them get there. So I love that from an organizational standpoint for the owners to realize that they can have more time than they realized. From a leader standpoint, again, I'll talk about my former CFO. Hired her as an accountant, and day one it was we were having a conversation, and it went like, I hope that you end up leaving us because you're so good that we're holding you back. Right? That's the approach that I want to take always. So some people are like, whoa, wait, don't push people out of here. But what happened is then I became the CEO and she became the CFO because we were both growing like crazy. And we sold this company for a huge multiple. And it was amazing. And now we're both doing things that we love doing.
Yep. That's incredible. And so if someone's listening to this and they're like, I need you to come PR implementer, like how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they could look me up. Of course, they'll have my name on the podcast because even if I spelled it out, they'd misspell it. You could look me up on LinkedIn. You can just Google search EOS and Charlton Keultjes, and you'll find my microsite. You could reach out through there, but best is probably through LinkedIn.
Last question, Charlton, is if you could have a beer with any implementer, who would it be?
I could. I've met a lot of other implementers, and the first thing that's coming to my mind is Kirsten Smith, and really because her and I just have a really similar approach on life, and right back to that memento mori, in that what's the reason that we're doing all of this, and it's for our family and to have the life that we want to live. So let's not dive too far into the work, even though we love it, in a way that, like I mentioned earlier, so often we dive and just bury ourselves in our work to live, right, to get this life that we never end up living. And so what's the point of that? We lose focus of that so easily. And so her and I are so well connected on that. Every time we run into each other, we go deep really fast. So that's probably it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you so much for spending almost an hour. I've got some incredible notes on this one, the power of coaching. I really loved what you said about how you use this EOS framework, and I just bought the EOS Life. I haven't read it yet, but I love how you intertwine this into your personal life. And I think a lot of us understand maybe what our core values are, or have an understanding of like what our compass says, but it's mostly a feeling. Not many people document that. And so I just loved hearing that. So, but thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the EOS Life. It didn't really come up, but it is truly personal. So it's good. And what's interesting is that I think a lot of people don't think that you can do the work that you love doing. I certainly never did. Right? It doesn't feel like work. I always thought that was crap, really. And now I'm doing it. And I think people listening to this podcast they have the ability to do that work. They have the ability to find what's magical. And doesn't feel like work.
That's awesome. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Confessions of an EOS Implementer is brought to you by Talent Harbor. To find out more about Talent Harbor and our fractional services and talent search solutions for businesses that operate on EOS, visit talentharbor.com. And then make sure to search for EOS Implementer in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Talent Harbor, thanks for listening.